Timecode is a 2000 released experimental film directed by Mike Figgis.
It's filmed in one continuous take on 4 different cameras, and takes place in sort of a small contained area of LA, centering around a production office, focusing on the life of one of the producers there, and his wife, and his mistress, and his mistress's girlfriend. He weaves a tangled web. So earthquake tremors punctuate romantic encounters and meetings and pitches and screenings and auditions, and it all builds to a sort of shocking but perhaps inevitable ending. No spoilers.
No spoilers.
Yes.
I hadn't seen this one before.
No,
it's one I knew. It's kind of like you mentioned doing it, and I had heard of it certainly, and I did know when I watched it. I knew it was the 4 screens. I was like, yeah, I definitely am aware of this film, and I'm aware of Mike Figgis because, of course, and when he made this film, he was kind of riding high on the back of Leaving Las Vegas, from the mid-90s film with Nicolas Cage and Elizabeth Shue. Very highly regarded, well thought after film. Yeah, this one. Interesting. I mean, when I say experimental film, that's what it is. It's an experiment, this film. Does it work? Yes, I think it does work, but I found the story to be really dull, and that was my problem with it. But in fact, interestingly, I watched there's a really interesting interview on YouTube with Mike Figgis, and he kind of spoke about the fact, and other reviewers I've read, they say, it is about the technical, it's about the technique and what he's trying to accomplish through the technique, and he needed a plot. He went on the back. There's a quote Jean-Luc Godard said, which is, "All you need for a movie is a girl and a gun," and he literally just took that premise and wrote a kind of story around that, and he made it as simple as I think he could, because for him it was the technique of the film.
So if you make it too complicated, then the plot's not going to come across when you've got to concentrate on 4 different things. Exactly. So it had to be simple just by the format that it was made.
Yeah, no, exactly. Although, I mean, I think now that an experiment like that has been done, I think possibly you could go out and do. I mean, obviously there are other films that have used split screen technology before. I think this was the first that used 4. I mean, I certainly didn't dislike this film. I did find myself at the time, and I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. So what basically happens while you're watching it is, so obviously that all 4 screens are all taking, so you're essentially watching 4 films at the same time. You're watching 4 screens, and none of them stop, but what they do is the volume goes down, and so you're kind of led to watch which one the director wants you to watch. So you're kind of going through a plot, but there's also you sometimes hear other things, but there was one. So I think it was the top right corner. You're kind of following the British actress Saffron Burrows. Now I didn't follow her story.
Not really,
at all.
It was quite difficult to hear everything that she was saying.
Yeah, so. And I found myself at times, I don't know if you've ever had this, when you're like, maybe I used to have this in school, because I never slept properly, or I was up all night watching films or whatever, I will nod off. And then you wake up a few minutes later and you're like, oh, I've missed something important. That's the feeling I got, because I look up to I was like, oh no, I've missed what's going on. But they didn't really focus too much. It was more on the other ones. Yeah. And I did find that I could almost watch 3 of the stories, not 4 of the stories. Yeah.
I mean, like you said, the audio will come up and down in volume depending on what it wants you to focus on, to make sure you don't miss important information. So Saffron Burrows starts off with a therapist, and they're having a conversation, and I think that's the first story that starts up, isn't it? That's the first screen that appears. Yeah. So obviously at that point you are listening to what she's saying, but then once the others start, because there's a lot more happening, you tend to sort of ignore it.
You do, yeah.
So you can tell that she's talking about a man, but it doesn't really, I didn't pick up much else from it.
But then interestingly, although I didn't really focus on that one, I knew what was going on, and by the end of the film, there was none of the bits. I may have missed a few bits here and there, but there was no part of the story I didn't realise what was going on.
No, I mean that's the thing.
I was never too lost.
I think
with it.
At one, I found myself. I looked at her portion of the screen, and she was no longer in with the therapist. I was like, oh, when did she leave the room? She was walking down the street, and I thought, how long was I watching a different bit of the screen?
Yeah.
So, but again, because the story is, at the start, I guess the first sort of 15, 20 minutes, it is a bit disorientating and a bit confusing perhaps. But once these characters start to interact, the threads start to come together, and you understand what's happening, even if you're not watching every bit and you're not paying attention to every bit. There's enough information to carry you through the main thread of the story.
Yes.
So from that point of view, it works quite well. I mean, I've got surround sound at home. Interestingly, with that, the audio for different screens came out of different speakers. So sometimes I could hear stuff behind me. Sometimes it'd be coming over on the right-hand side. And there'd be a different conversation over on the left-hand side. There would still be one. Usually, the centre speaker would be the loudest. Whatever I was supposed to be concentrating on would be the loudest volume. When sound is coming from different directions, it's easier to sort of focus on that.
Yeah.
If I wanted to hear what was going on, even if I'm not necessarily meant to be listening to that over the other, what else is going on, you can sort of zone the others out and concentrate on one sort of bit of audio that's coming to you, which it was weird at first, but I thought actually this was a really good use of this sort of the surround sound. Obviously, I don't know how it worked for you on the stereo.
I did find at times there was dialogue going on that I couldn't quite.
It probably
pick
gets
out.
a bit muddled.
It did get a bit lost. It's an experiment, this film, and I think that's what he was going for, and that's what it feels like as well. I mean, it's got a highly accomplished cast. It's like an ensemble cast. It's a lot of very well known people. You've got people like Salma Hayek in there, and Stellan Skarsgård, and Jean Tripplehorn, Holly Hunter. She's not in it very often, not much. Xander Berkeley, Danny Houston, Leslie Mann, loads of actors, Julian Sands. But the interesting thing was, because it was very low budget, this film, obviously. To me, they felt a bit like kind of amateurish at times. But then they were improvising a lot of it too. And it was kind of on the fly, and he was filming it kind of like one take. So it was, I thought technically it was really interesting, and I certainly went with it. Like I said, there's this really interesting, it's like a 15-minute YouTube video. I think the channel's Little White Lies. I think they do lots of interesting like film stuff. It's literally just Mike Figgis talking. I think it was filmed because it was filmed on like Zoom or something. It was filmed during the pandemic, and he talks about there's a moment in there when Stellan Skarsgård's character and Salma Hayek's character are basically having sex on screen, and he was talking to a room full of film students, I think, and he said, "Did you notice what went on in the top screen?" I won't say what it is in case you haven't seen it. And no one did except one person, because everyone was concentrating on them having sex, but they missed out on what was happening up on this screen. But one person pointed it out because she happened to be gay, so she wasn't bothered with the two, man and woman having sex. But she was interested in what was going up on the top right corner and top, which I completely missed as well. Because yes, I suppose focused on the sex scene.
I can't remember. I must have missed it.
So yeah, I mean, but I think that's what's interesting about a film like this is that, and I think probably that's what the director got from it, is he didn't know what was going to happen when he made it, and while making it, all these kind of interesting things came out of it, and so yeah, I mean, I think from the point of view of it being an experimental film, and it's clearly inspired by other films, one take shots like Rope, which was supposed to be a one-shot film. So you've got films like that. Then you've got numerous films that have used the split screen technology over the years. From that point of view, from it being an experiment, I think it's a really interesting experiment, and I went with it, and it did keep me hooked, and I was quite unnerved at times. I thought it was very clever watching it. I mean, it's a little bit like watching a bank of CCTV screens, I mean, that's because you kind of think to yourself, when in my life would I ever watch, it's an odd premise, it's an odd thing to do. I mean, obviously it's kind of breaking the conventions of cinema a little bit. We're so used to just watching one screen. Occasionally we might watch two. Watching four like that for the whole film, so you are essentially watching four films. It is, I mean, the only thing I can think like it is watching, a number of CCTV screens. Where I work, we've got a bank of screens, and that's what's similar, is watching those, but with sound, which makes it kind of like, I thought it was really interesting. I liked it. It was strange, And but I think it worked, but purely from a technical.
Yeah,
I mean, the story was dull and the acting was a bit all over the place.
Well, like you said, they
but that wasn't the
improvised,
point.
and there wasn't a script as such. He actually used music paper to sort of plan it out and color coded things, because people, a camera might start with certain characters, but then that character might move to where a different camera is and things like that. So, there was obviously crossing over of cameras. They had to, avoid each other, make sure they didn't get other cameras in the shot, because a lot of it takes place in one location, inside and out. They had to be careful not to film each other. I mean, there's a couple of bits where you can see the camera operator's hand as they like push a door open and things like that, but very brief. And it's kind of inevitable. And when you're doing it in one take, that's it. You can't just say, "Oh no, I saw my hand." You'll have to stop because you've already filmed an hour. So there's not much you can do. I mean, they did it 15 times, I think, and they'd film in the morning and then they'd put 4 monitors together and watch the whole thing and just see, give feedback and take notes and then go again the next day. Obviously every day they do it, they sort of get to know their characters better, and there's probably different line readings that they would give. So I mean, it's interesting to think that technically there's 15 films out there, same plot but ever so slightly different.
I mean, I think it also is interesting that thing which I've often thought about before with films is that obviously when you're watching a film with just one, different cameras, but one screen, you often get. I mean, there are filmmakers out there who have experimented where people come together in a scene, but then it's shown from different angles. Often they'll cut. They might show a scenario happening, and then they'll go back and look at that same scenario from someone else's point of view. There have been many films that have done that over the years. But of course, this is doing it differently, and you're seeing it from different point of views, but all at the same time.
Yeah.
And I mean, the one thing that kind of carries through the film is these earthquakes that happen. So, it's timed kind of perfectly, and then the earthquake happens, and every single person reacts to that earthquake. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. And, Julian Sands, interesting guy, him. I don't know what he was doing. He was supposed to be a masseur, and
apparently that was his idea.
Oh, was
I think Mike Figgis just wanted him to be some sort of British film executive, and he was like, "Nah, that's boring and
I'll just be a
cliche." So
right.
He just decided he was going to be some masseuse.
Which is just weird. He kind of comes in the room and starts massaging people's heads and their necks, and you're like, why are you there?
It's strange.
It's
but
very
it
strange.
It kind of works. It adds a little bit of a strange element
to it. Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, and I mean, even Danny Houston's character, he's like the security guard for this building, and even he's a bit like, what's he up to?
It's useless. He doesn't do any security stuff.
In the toilet, snorting cocaine, and
there's a lot of cocaine snorted in this film, isn't
it is early 2000s.
Well, it is.
I mean, that's the other interesting thing, I suppose. It's kind of interesting watching this in a kind of now in a post Harvey Weinstein world because of some of the subject matter within the film. So I think watching it from now, and of course, and Mike Figgis talks about this in the video, is also we now in a post pandemic world as well, where people have been zooming each other. So people have been looking at many different screens.
Yeah.
So he talks about. I mean, it's well worth. Maybe I'll put a link down to it because it's really interesting.
Well, yeah.
Look at the film.
If you watch it, just imagine it's a Zoom call that you're on, but people are carrying their phones around rather than having their face in front of the screen.
Yes, exactly. And there was a film, and I don't know what it was called. I should have looked up beforehand, but it was noticing that. I think there was a horror film done where everyone was looking,
The Host.
Was it Host?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, that was it, last year. Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah, no, it was really good.
It did look quite interesting, so I might give that one a look as well. But we have this on DVD. You have it on DVD?
Yeah, I picked up the Region 1 a while ago. I mean, I can't remember. I think it was off the back of another film we did. I was looking into it and looking at films one of the cast members had done.
I think it was Glenn Headley, wasn't it?
Possibly, yeah.
We've done 2 of her films, I think.
And I saw this, I thought, what's that? Whether I'd heard of it at the time, that sounds interesting, I'll give it a go, picked up a copy. There doesn't appear to be any Blu-rays available, because it's relatively sort of a forgotten, unknown film, despite the cast. Like I said, there was various different versions that they filmed over the course of 15 days, and it's got version 1, which is obviously the first take they did, on there as well, with a commentary on it. Yeah, video diary and stuff like that. No, certainly lots of behind the scenes stuff and talking about the sort of the concept and how he came up with it. I think he originally he was thinking about filming something with 2 cameras, and then he thought, actually, how about 3? And then decided, well, no, let's just go for 4. And I think he was telling an executive from a studio about his idea, not as a pitch or anything, just talking about it. And the guy said, "Oh, just come make it for us, and we'll give you some money."
Well,
So
he
it's
had
like, okay.
he'd done a film before this, I think over here, which has Saffron Burrows in it,
Yeah.
which is two
Yeah.
screens. That was on that video as well. But it's basically kind of one shot, but using two cameras, and then you're watching both of those like takes on the same screen. It was Saffron Burrows, and I think the guy was. It looked like that Scottish actor Peter Mullen.
All right.
It looked like him, but don't quote me on that. It just looked like him. But yeah, he
Was that
did
Miss
that.
Julia?
Yes,
that
that was it. Miss
Yeah.
Julia, that was it. He, I think the film he did after this also used not four, but he used split screen, and he also experimented with like using, like split screen and then maybe three screens, but also panoramic screens, but then like putting in one screen in the middle. I mean, another filmmaker, Peter Greenaway, is a British filmmaker who's done lots of. I mean, his films are highly experimental and art house, and he's used often screens, using four screens and even like four screens on kind of overlaying another screen as well. So almost five screens. Lots of strange stuff that he implements. I mean, Mike Figgis talks about being inspired by a lot of experimental theatre as well, and having worked with experimental theatre and people like that using these techniques before film had used them as well. So yeah,
I mean, interesting on the DVD, it's in full frame, so it's basically square.
yeah,
Which when this was released back in 2000, the vast majority of people didn't have square TVs.
yeah.
But of course now, you've got big black bars down the side of your telly. But no, that was Mike Figgis' choice to release it like that, and the images are, they're open matte, so you are seeing more of the individual frames, but of course because it's compressed into a smaller space, you're seeing more, but the images are smaller. So obviously in the cinema it would have been in widescreen, and those each individual picture would have been cropped but larger. So but I think that there's streaming. I think you can rent it or buy it on Amazon, can't you? Digitally. So that's probably the widescreen version. Yeah, you can get it digitally if you want, or pick up the DVD.
And that was Timecode. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Hit the subscribe button up there, and don't forget to push the bell for notifications. There's other videos to check out over there. Come and find us on social media, and join us again soon for another video.